Sleep Stories for Restless Minds. Welcome to another journey from Restless Minds, where each story is crafted to guide you gently toward rest. Tonight, we invite you deep into the Amazon jungle, a place where rivers remember, trees whisper in spirals, and stillness tells its own tale. This story unfolds slowly like fog along the water. With each part, you'll drift a little deeper into a world that asks nothing of you but presence. So find a quiet place, let your breath settle, and let the jungle carry you somewhere softer than sleep. Your journey begins now. The sky above the rainforest was thick with late light, the kind that turns gold as it filters through a million green leaves. The air was warm, not heavy and full of sound, not loud, just constant. Cicadas, birds, water, and something deeper, the slow breath of the jungle itself. 3 travelers sat at the edge of a narrow wooden boat, drifting slowly along a wide and meandering river. The current was gentle. The oars rested untouched. The boat moved on its own. Their names were Camila, Luca, and Jonas. Camila sat at the front, eyes scanning the trees, but never urgently. She was quiet and precise, her movements measured like someone listening more than leading. She carried a small, leather-bound notebook, worn at the edges, and a folded map she never looked at. Luca sat near the middle, legs crossed, sketching something in charcoal on a small pad of paper. He was younger, curious, often speaking too softly to be heard. The jungle had made him quieter than usual. Jonas steered from the back, though he hadn't touched the rudder in nearly an hour. His boots were muddy. His shirt was open at the collar. He kept glancing at the sky, not because he feared the rain, but because it reminded him of something he couldn't quite place. They had come into the jungle by foot days earlier, but something had changed when they found the river. It had felt inviting. So they boarded the small boat tied to a half-submerged post and drifted away without much discussion. The map Camila carried didn't show this route, and yet none of them asked where it led. They were explorers, yes, but not of treasure, not of ruins. They were looking for something quieter, something older, something that would not be found in guidebooks or journals. And as the jungle narrowed around them, thick with vines and golden mist, none of them felt afraid. Because some journeys begin not with a question, but with stillness. And the river knew exactly where to take them. The boat drifted for hours, winding gently along the slow, wide current. Overhead, the canopy thickened. Vines hung like soft curtains, brushing the surface of the river. Trees leaned in, not to crowd, but to listen. Jonas sat quietly, one hand trailing through the water. The surface was warm, smooth, and full of scattered reflections. Leaves, birds, the faint shape of clouds above. Yet none of it felt distant. It all felt close. "We've gone quiet," Luca said, not quite asking. Camila closed her eyes for a moment before answering. "The trees are talking." Jonas smirked. "I thought that was the wind." "No," she said. "It's older than wind." They didn't question her. Camila had always spoken that way, carefully, like someone reading a story that was still unfolding beneath her breath. The jungle around them hummed. Not loud, not strange, just alive. The calls of distant howler monkeys, the flap of wings in the upper branches, the drip of water from roots to surface. And somewhere beyond all of it, a rhythm, like a slow drum beating under the earth. Luca leaned over the edge of the boat, watching the shore. "There's something carved into that tree," he said. They all turned to look. Near the riverbank, half-shrouded in vines, was a tall ceiba tree. At its base, worn smooth with time, was a small spiral carved shallow into the bark. Not modern, not fresh, but deliberate. They passed it without stopping. Camila opened her notebook and made a quick mark. "That's the second one." Jonas raised a brow. "How many do you think we'll find?" "As many as we're meant to," she said. The boat continued on, and the spiral faded behind them. They didn't know who had carved it, but they all felt it, the sense that the jungle was not just vast, not just beautiful. It was waiting, and they were not alone. Afternoon settled slowly across the jungle, like a soft cloth draped over the sky. The sun filtered through the canopy in long, slanted beams, golden and warm, catching on mist and insects and the edges of leaves too high to reach. The river widened just a little. Not far ahead, a curve in the current revealed something unexpected: birds. Dozens of them. Blue, red, and bright yellow, parrots, macaws, a pair of scarlet ibises. They weren't perched in the treetops, as one might expect. They were low, very low, gliding just above the water. None of them made a sound. Jonas slowed the boat, even though the current wasn't strong. "Why are they flying like that?" he asked quietly. Luca sat forward, eyes wide. "They're following the bend." Camila watched them without blinking. "They're showing us something." The boat drifted gently into the curve. On the far side, the trees opened just enough to reveal an inlet, hidden, narrow, and ringed by thick foliage. Water lilies floated in lazy clusters. Ferns leaned out from the banks. A stone structure sat half-sunken at the edge, covered in moss and vines. It was too small to be a temple, too natural to be a ruin. But someone had built it. And long ago, the birds landed in the trees above it and went still. Jonas steered toward the inlet without a word. The boat glided to a stop beside the stone. Luca stepped out first. The moss was soft beneath his feet. He touched the edge of the structure, running his fingers along the stone. Another spiral, small, carved into the side. He looked back at the others. Same symbol. Camila opened her notebook. 3. They didn't enter the structure. Not yet. It didn't feel right. Not like a place you explore, more like a place you pause beside. So they sat at its edge, listening to the sound of birds, of frogs, of water shifting gently against rock. And above all that, the sense that the spiral wasn't finished. It was leading them somewhere deeper and quieter. Evening was approaching, though the sky barely changed. The jungle dimmed not with shadow, but with sound. The shift of birds finding branches, frogs beginning their low, rhythmic chorus, and the occasional whisper of leaves stirred by something unseen. The travelers still sat near the mossy stone. They hadn't spoken in a while. Not out of fear, but out of quiet respect for the space around them. The air felt thicker here, but gentle, like wool soaked in rain, or hands pressing slowly into cool clay. Luca finally stood and stepped toward the structure. He didn't enter. He just placed a hand on the stone wall and closed his eyes. "It's warm," he whispered. Jonas looked up. "Sun-warmed?" "No," Luca said. "Like it's breathing." Camila stood as well, notebook at her side. She moved along the structure's edge, carefully brushing aside a few leaves. The carving was clearer here, a spiral again, but with small dots along its outer curve. "Marks," she said. 7. Jonas stepped closer, kneeling beside her. "Like a map?" "Or a sequence," she murmured. "Maybe a cycle." They didn't know what it meant, but the stillness around them suggested they would if they didn't rush it. A soft breeze stirred the ferns near the riverbank. A shadow passed overhead, a bird, or a bat, or something older. And then a sound low and deep, like a breath exhaled through stone. Luca stepped back from the wall. None of them ran. None of them spoke. They simply stood still, as the stone seemed to settle again, like a sleeping creature rolling gently in its dreams. Night was falling. Camila glanced upriver. "We'll stay nearby," she said. "Just for a few hours. It's not done with us yet." Jonas nodded. "Then we wait." They set up their hammocks between 3 wide trees, not far from the boat, close enough to see the structure, just in case it moved again. And under the weight of 1,000 stars hidden by leaves, they drifted into sleep to the sound of frogs, breath, and the silent humming of stone. The jungle at night did not sleep. It simply rearranged its sounds. What had been birds and leaves now became frogs, insects, the far-off call of something unseen but unafraid. The fireflies emerged one by one, slow and quiet, their soft yellow light drifting like thoughts. Camila lay in her hammock, half awake, listening. Her notebook rested on her chest, still open to the page marked with spirals. She traced the lines lightly with one finger, not writing, just feeling. Luca hadn't moved in a while. He slept with one arm over his face, gently snoring, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Whatever he dreamed, it kept him calm. Jonas, however, was awake. He sat near the boat, sharpening a stick, not for protection, but out of habit. Something to keep his hands busy while his thoughts stayed quiet. The structure was visible in the low light, just a few paces away. Still, silent, but somehow present. There was a pulse to the place. Not dangerous, just where. Sometime deep in the night, a soft thud came from the forest floor. Not close, not sharp, just there. Jonas turned his head, but didn't move. Then another, a different sound this time, wood on stone. Camila sat up slowly. Did you hear that? He nodded, still hearing it. Luca stirred but didn't wake. Camila climbed down from her hammock and walked quietly to the structure. At its base, near the same spiral as before, something had changed. A bowl, shallow, stone, carved directly into the base, where before there had been only moss. It hadn't been there earlier. Camila knelt beside it, brushing away dew with her sleeve. Inside the bowl sat three things. A feather, a rounded piece of obsidian, and a single unmarked clay bead. She didn't touch them. She only whispered, "It's not telling us where to go." Jonas came to stand behind her. "No, it's asking us why we're here." The frogs grew louder. The jungle darkened again, not with shadow, but with thought. They would not sleep deeply that night. But they would rest, because the questions didn't need answers. Not yet, just attention. The sun came slowly, not in beams or bursts, but in a gentle warmth that settled across the leaves and skin like a whisper. The jungle remained quiet for a while, holding its breath as the travelers stirred. Camila was the first to rise. She approached the stone bowl again. The three items were exactly where they had been left: the feather, the obsidian, the clay bead. Dew sparkled faintly on their surfaces, though nothing else around them was wet. Jonas stepped beside her, rubbing the back of his neck. "Still feels like a puzzle," he muttered. "It's not meant to be solved," Camila replied. "It's meant to be considered." Luca emerged from his hammock, blinking into the soft morning light. "Did it grow out of the stone?" he asked, staring at the bowl. Camila nodded slowly. "Or it revealed itself." They sat by the structure, not speaking much, passing around a canteen of lukewarm tea. Jonas had managed to steep before the fire gave out. No one dared touch the offerings. Instead, they took turns studying them, sketching, noting, observing without expectation. The feather was pale gray, but not from any bird they recognized. Its edges shimmered faintly in the light. The obsidian was smooth and perfectly round, as though water had shaped it for 1,000 years. The clay bead was simple, handmade, but when Camila turned her head just slightly, she thought she saw a swirl etched faintly across its center. They remained with the bowl until the sun climbed high enough to turn the moss warm beneath their feet. Then Camila closed her notebook. "It's time to go." Jonas raised an eyebrow. "Where?" She looked upriver, wherever the next spiral waits. They returned to the boat in silence, not hurried, not hesitant. As they pushed off and the current resumed its slow guidance, Luca turned back to look at the stone one last time. The bowl was empty. No feather. No stone. No bead. Just soft moss in the spiral beneath it. As though nothing had ever been offered. And everything had... The river grew narrower as the morning deepened. Its waters darkened, not with danger, but with depth. Fish darted beneath the surface like passing thoughts, too quick to catch, too gentle to fear. Birds called in the upper canopy, their songs spaced far apart, like notes left between pages. Jonas kept one hand resting on the side of the boat. His fingers trailed through the cool current, the way one might touch the edge of a sleeping animal. "There's something ahead," Luca said, sitting forward. A bend in the river opened slowly, revealing a small island at its center, no more than 30 feet wide, covered in thick, low brush and one wide fig tree. A circle of stones lined the bank, too evenly spaced to be natural. Camila stood in the boat. "That wasn't on the map," Jonas said. Camila didn't answer. She was watching the tree. It didn't move. but it felt where. They docked quietly at the edge of the stones and stepped ashore. The soil was soft and cool. The air here smelled sweeter, more like herbs than river mist. There were no insects, no birds, just quiet. And in the center, beneath the wide fig tree, was a flat stone slab. Upon it, a pile of dried leaves arranged in a perfect spiral. Luca crouched beside it. Someone made this recently. No, Camilla said. The wind did. Jonas raised a brow. Or something using the wind. None of them disturbed it. They simply circled the fig tree slowly, each sensing something beneath the surface of things, like a story not yet told but already known. Camilla paused and touched the tree's bark. There's a message here, she said, but not for us to take. They stayed just long enough to listen. Not to voices, not to whispers, but to the space between them. And when they returned to the boat, none of them looked back. The leaves remained in their spiral. The stones remained in their ring. And the island remained. The boat floated on, guided gently by the current as midday settled over the jungle. Shadows shifted across the water like long fingers, slow and quiet. The travelers said little, their minds still wrapped around the silence of the island. Camilla sat with her notebook open, but blank. She didn't draw this time. She just listened. Jonas leaned back, eyes half closed, boots resting on the edge of the wooden plank. Luca dangled his hand into the water again, fingers skimming ripples. There's a sound, he said after a long silence. Camilla nodded slowly. I hear it too. It wasn't loud. In fact, it barely passed the threshold of hearing. But it was there, a low hum, steady and soft like a note held just below the surface of thought. It came from ahead, somewhere along the next bend. As the river turned, they saw it. A massive tree stood at the edge of the bank, its roots spilling down the slope and dipping into the water like braids. Some were thick and knotted. Others looked delicate, almost woven. And as the boat passed, the sound grew clearer. A song. Not with melody or rhythm, but with tone. Each root vibrated gently, barely, but together they created a chord. One that didn't change, but deepened the longer they listened. Jonas slowed the boat, letting it drift as they passed the tree. Camilla reached out and touched one of the lower roots. It was warm. The hum passed into her fingers, up her arm into her chest. She closed her eyes, and for a brief moment she remembered something she'd never known, her grandmother's voice, not speaking, not singing, just present, steady. When she opened her eyes, the tree was behind them, and the hum had faded. She didn't say anything. None of them did, because the sound had not ended. It had just followed them inward. The hum of the singing root faded slowly, becoming part of the silence around them, one of those sounds that lingers without needing to be heard again. The river narrowed once more, curving between tall banks where reeds grew thick and green. They rustled softly, even without wind. Camilla sat with her notebook closed. Not out of forgetfulness, but because this part of the story didn't need to be written. Some chapters, she thought, are meant to be remembered only by being lived. Up there, Jonas said. Near the bend, tucked against the far shore, was an old canoe. Long, narrow, half hidden in the reeds. It looked handmade, carved from a single tree trunk, weathered but still whole. It hadn't drifted here. It had been placed. They pulled alongside it slowly. No footprints on the shore, no broken brush, just the canoe, and something inside it. Luca leaned over the edge of their boat. What is that? A small bundle rested inside the canoe, wrapped in palm fibers, tied with a vine. No markings, no note. Camilla reached toward it, then paused. Do you feel that? Jonas nodded. It wasn't fear. It wasn't energy. It was stillness. So quiet it felt like something had stopped here. Not in warning, but in peace. Camilla didn't take the bundle. She just rested her hand beside it. The vine unwound on its own. The fibers parted. Inside was a small carved object, round like a seed, but clearly made by hand. A spiral etched along one side, the same as the others, but smaller. tighter. A quiet memory. Jonas reached forward, then stopped. "I don't think we're meant to carry it," he said. "No," Camilla replied. "We're meant to witness it." They sat for a while beside the old canoe, saying nothing, just letting the moment settle. Then they drifted on, and behind them the reeds folded inward. The canoe disappeared from view. But the spiral remained. The sun passed its peak, though it was hard to tell from beneath the thick canopy. The light filtered down in golden patches, broken by vines and wide, feathered leaves. The river was slower here, stiller, as though it too had paused to breathe. Camilla's hand trailed over the side of the boat the same way Jonas's had hours before. Her fingertips stirred the surface just slightly, barely enough to leave a ripple. Luca pointed ahead. "That tree's different." It was. They all saw it. Rising from the riverbank, wide and pale, was a single kapok tree, massive, towering, with a trunk as thick as a room and roots that stretched out like arms, pulling the forest into itself. The bark was smooth and pale, almost silver in the light, and its canopy formed a soft green dome high above. They steered the boat toward it without speaking. As they stepped ashore, a hush settled over them. Birds didn't call here. Leaves didn't rustle. Even the water moved more gently. The tree was still, but not empty. Felt full. Not of words. Not of voices. But of memory. Camilla walked the wide base of the trunk. Etched into the bark, faint but unmistakable, was a spiral. Smaller than the others, but surrounded now by rings, circles within circles, like the spiral had echoed outward. "It's not just marking the way," she said. "It's recording what's happened." Jonas leaned against one of the great roots. "A map?" "No," Luca said softly. "A journal." They stayed in the shade of the kapok tree until the sun shifted again, until light began to filter from a new angle, and the hush began to lift. The birds returned. A breeze passed, and the tree let them go. They stepped back into the boat slowly, and as they drifted once more into the current, none of them looked back. But the memory of that stillness followed. Not heavy, just close. The current shifted. Not fast, not sudden, but certain. The water, once a deep greenish-brown, had turned a strange shade of blue-gray, murky but luminous, like smoke drifting beneath the surface. It didn't feel dangerous, just different. Camilla sat with her eyes closed. Luca leaned over the edge of the boat, watching the colors swirl beneath them. "It's like it knows we're here." "It does," Camilla whispered. Jonas squinted at the water. "Tide shift?" "No tide here," she replied. And she was right. This part of the river had no tide, no rapids. It flowed according to something older than wind or gravity. They passed a narrow split in the river, a small channel winding off to the right, but the current did not lead them there. It drew them forward, and the air changed. It grew cooler, not cold, but cool in the way caves feel before you see them. The sounds of the jungle remained, but more distant now, as though they'd stepped behind something. A curtain, a wall of sound. And then they saw it. On the left bank, almost hidden, was a smooth slab of stone resting at an angle, half covered by ferns and shadow. On it 5 spirals, nested within each other like the rings of a tree stump. Luca sketched it quickly, saying nothing. Camilla whispered, "It's watching." Jonas exhaled slowly. "Feels like something's about to begin." They drifted past without stopping, because the spiral wasn't asking to be approached. Only seen. It wasn't a message. It was a warning. Not of danger, but of depth. Something deeper than language was coming. And the river wanted them calm when it arrived. The river bent gently again, curving into a wide hollow lined with tall reeds and overhanging branches. The water here became flat, so still it looked like glass poured over the forest floor. The boat stopped drifting, not because it hit something. It simply stopped, as if the river had decided here. Camilla looked around. "We're meant to pause." Jonas nodded and leaned over the side. It's deeper here. Luca said nothing. His eyes were fixed on something in the center of the pool. A circle. Not drawn. Not floating. Just there. A perfect ring of lighter color on the surface of the water, faint, like breath on a mirror. I don't see a current, Jonas said. There isn't one, Camilla replied. Luca turned to them slowly. It's a doorway. They didn't ask what he meant. The air didn't feel like it needed answers. It felt like it needed silence. They floated in place, the boat steady, unmoving. And in the center of the pool, that pale ring never shifted. Not with breeze, not with time. Jonas crouched near the front of the boat. We don't go in? Camilla shook her head. We let it come to us. And so they waited. They didn't speak. They barely moved. Only the sounds of their breath and the distant rhythm of the forest remained. And then the ring in the water flickered. Not outward, not inward, just once. As if something had blinked. Then it was gone. No splash, no ripple. But each of them felt it. A moment passed through them. Like the jungle had looked directly at them and said, I see you. They didn't speak as the boat began to move again. It started slowly, without a push, without a sound. The current resumed as if it had never stopped, as if the moment in the still pool had simply been a pause in something far older than time. The jungle changed too. Not in shape. Feeling. The trees leaned differently here. Their trunks were darker, their roots more tangled. The vines seemed less like plants and more like script, writing messages across branches no one had yet learned to read. The air was damp and cool but soft like the edge of a dream. Jonas adjusted the rudder without thinking. Camilla leaned her head back, letting the filtered light dance across her closed eyelids. It's breathing, she whispered. What is? Luca asked. The forest. They all listened. And she was right. There was a rhythm to the wind now, to the rustle of leaves, a slow inhale and a longer exhale. It wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. But it was there. And as they drifted forward, the sound became clearer, like a heartbeat muffled beneath layers of moss and soil. A deep hum rose from beneath the boat. Not threatening, just ancient. Luca's voice was barely audible. Are we inside something? Camilla didn't open her eyes. Not inside, alongside. Jonas looked at the riverbanks. Faintly carved into a fallen tree, half submerged in the water, was another spiral, this one split down the middle by a line. The first they'd seen like that. Luca leaned forward. What do you think it means? Camilla opened her eyes and said softly, It means we've crossed into the part where remembering begins. And ahead of them the light shifted. Just enough to show that the river wasn't leading them into darkness, but into depth. The river grew narrow again. Its banks pressed in softly, not to trap, but to hold. Branches arched overhead, woven so tightly with leaves that light filtered through in small round shapes, like coins scattered on the surface of the water. It felt like stepping inside a story that had been waiting to be read. Luca was the first to notice the tree. It stood to the right of the river, tall and rooted at a slight angle. Its bark was smooth and pale gold. But more than that, its trunk shimmered faintly as if wet, though there was no water on it. They drifted closer. The shimmer moved. Not like light, like memory. Images swirled faintly beneath the bark, too soft to see clearly, too slow to chase. But there were faces, shapes, maybe even scenes, rippling like fog on glass. Jonas blinked. What is that? Camilla stood in the boat, eyes fixed on the trunk. It's a memory tree. Luca's voice dropped to a whisper. But whose memories? Camilla shook her head. Not ours. Not yet. They let the boat coast silently to the edge, bumping gently against the roots. Camilla reached out slowly and placed her hand on the trunk. The shimmer paused. A single image formed, clearer than the rest. A boat. Not theirs. Older. Cracked, covered in vines. Empty. Then it faded. Jonas didn't speak. He stepped to the shore and crouched near the base of the tree. There, partially hidden under the leaves, was a worn bit of fabric, dark green, embroidered with a small spiral in dull thread. He held it up. Camilla studied it for a moment. Someone else came this way. Luca nodded and left something behind. The river didn't rush them. It waited, and when they returned to the boat, the memory tree shimmered once more. But this time, no images appeared. Only light. Soft golden light, spilling like breath into the space between each branch. After they left the memory tree, the river turned quiet again. Not silent, just echoless. Sounds still happened. The creak of wood, the splash of a fish, the distant call of a bird, but none of them came back. There was no reply, no reflection. As if the jungle was listening so deeply it swallowed every sound whole. Camilla noticed it first. She snapped a twig in her hand and heard nothing in return. Luca clapped once gently. The sound stopped the moment it left his palms. Jonas frowned. It's like the air is made of wool. Camilla nodded. This place doesn't return what we send out. They drifted until the river widened again, forming a still, shallow basin rimmed with ferns and silent trees. In the center stood a strange arrangement of stones, tall, thin, uneven, like teeth in a slow, yawning mouth. Each one was carved with a spiral, but unlike the others, these spirals were incomplete, broken halfway, the lines ending abruptly. Camilla stood in the boat. They started something here, she whispered. But they couldn't finish it, Jonas added. Luca stepped onto the shore, walking slowly toward the stones. In the center was a small hollow, like a well filled with moss. He knelt beside it, staring down. And for a moment, just a flicker, he saw a face. His own. Not reflected. Remembered. Not as he was. As he had been. Alone. Small. At a river's edge, far from this one. He didn't speak. He just stood, breathed, and let it pass. The others joined him. They didn't ask what he saw, because in a place with no echo, there's no need to say what's already known. They lingered among the broken spirals longer than they planned. Not because anything held them there, but because something allowed them to stay. The clearing was quiet, still echoless, but less heavy than before. The air, though thick with green, had a softness to it now, like a lullaby hummed under breath. Camilla crouched beside one of the stones. A small hollow sat at its base, lined with dried leaves and specks of pale ash. She reached into her pack and pulled out a smooth river stone she'd picked up days earlier, a warm, speckled shape she'd kept without knowing why. She placed it in the hollow. The clearing didn't change, but something within her did. Luca watched, then reached for his pocket. He took out a scrap of paper, a charcoal sketch of a spiral he'd drawn in the boat, and folded it once, then again, then again. When it could fold no more, he placed it inside another hollow, beneath a smaller, leaning stone. Jonas didn't move at first. Then slowly, he unlooped a thin leather cord from his wrist. It held a brass ring worn smooth. He rolled it between his fingers for a long time before setting it beneath the tallest stone. They didn't speak. Not a word. Because the moment didn't need words, only release. The forest stayed quiet. The broken spirals didn't glow, didn't shift, didn't close. But they felt less incomplete. Like someone had finally listened. And that was enough. They returned to the boat as the light softened overhead. The river, still wide, welcomed them back like a quiet host. Camilla glanced at the bank as they drifted away. A new spiral had appeared, carved faintly into one of the stones. Whole. Broken. As if to say, now it can begin. The river narrowed again after the clearing, curling gently between taller trees that leaned inward like old friends speaking without words. Above them, the canopy thinned, just a little. For the first time in what felt like days, the sky peeked through in full pieces, not just scattered light. It was a deep, soft blue. No clouds, no birds, just openness. Camila looked up and let her breath out slowly. It feels higher here. Luca shaded his eyes and nodded, like the forest is giving us space. Jonas rested his hands behind his head, leaning back with a faint smile. I forgot what open sky looked like. They floated beneath it for a while, letting the light warm their faces. No spirals. No stone. Just leaves, light, and the sound of water brushing gently against wood. It was the first part of the journey that didn't ask anything of them. And it felt good. At one point, Luca closed his eyes and whispered, "This is the kind of sky I used to imagine when I was a kid." Camila smiled without looking at him. That's how you know it's real. Jonas reached into his pack and passed around a small bundle of dried fruit. They ate in silence, sharing the moment like it was something sacred. Nothing spoke. Nothing shifted. But all three of them felt it. The jungle was still with them, but it wasn't watching anymore. It was walking beside them. Not guiding, accompanying. And in that quiet hour beneath the open sky, the journey softened. Not because it had ended, but because they were ready for what came next. The sky slowly disappeared again as the river wound into a narrow channel. Branches arched overhead and vines hung lower. The light dimmed, not into darkness but into memory, like walking into a room you hadn't visited in years. They passed a bend, and there it was, a small village, or what remained of one. Huts made from wood and palm leaves, silent, perfectly intact, no signs of rot, no vines overtaking the walls, just stillness, as if everyone had stepped away only moments ago. Jonas leaned forward. It's not abandoned. Camila stood, her voice soft. It's asleep. Luca nodded slowly, waiting. They brought the boat to shore and stepped out onto soft earth. The ground was swept clean. No footprints. No animals. Just silence and the faint scent of something herbal, sage maybe, or crushed lemongrass. The first hut they entered had mats rolled neatly in the corners. A bowl of water sat beside a small wooden stool. The water was clean, unmoving. Camila ran her hand along the inside wall. This place doesn't feel gone. No, Jonas said. It feels paused. They moved from hut to hut, each one telling the same quiet story. Nothing broken, nothing ruined, only stillness. In the largest structure, near the center of the village, they found a fire circle with cold ash. Above it, etched into a single beam of wood, was the spiral again. But this one was closed. Not broken, not open-ended. A perfect loop. Camila traced it lightly. It's a resting place, she said, not a ruin. They stayed a while. They didn't disturb anything. Just sat near the fire circle, letting the weight of the place settle gently on their shoulders. Luca whispered, "Do you think they'll return?" Camila smiled faintly. Maybe they already have. And as the travelers stepped back into their boat, the jungle held its breath once more. Not because it feared what would come next, but because it remembered. And now so did they. They left the sleeping village slowly. Not because they were uncertain, but because they knew something had changed. The river, though narrow, had become less directional, more like a mirror winding in lazy shapes that seemed to reflect the rhythm of their thoughts. No wind. No rush. The jungle, too, was quieter than before. They passed trees that felt familiar, even though they had never seen them. Vines that curled gently from the canopy above like fingers tracing lines in the air, and leaves that shimmered just enough to make you wonder if they had always been there or had grown just for you. Camila sat still at the front of the boat. She hadn't written in her notebook since the memory tree. It was open in her lap, blank, the pen resting softly between two fingers. Luca sat near the middle, watching his own reflection in the water, not out of vanity, but out of curiosity. His face looked different. Not older, not tired, just quieter. Jonas, at the back of the boat, noticed something first. A faint track along the right bank. A path, but not one worn by feet. No crushed leaves, no broken branches, no mud displaced, just absence. a space where the jungle bent slightly away. Camilla saw it too. It's a path. But no one's walked it, Jonas said. Luca leaned over the edge. Maybe it's not for feet. They didn't stop. They didn't turn. But the boat slowed as it passed. And each of them felt it. A memory waiting on that path. Not theirs. But familiar. Like something left behind long ago that had finally come to rest. Jonas whispered, I don't think we're following a trail anymore. Does? Camilla nodded. I think we're becoming one. The river turned once more, and as it did, the light changed. It wasn't brighter. Just different. Cooler, with a faint lavender cast that shimmered across the surface of the water. Camilla noticed it first, how the color of the leaves shifted slightly from green to a soft silvery hue. Then they saw it. The shore. It wasn't like the others. Instead of reeds or roots or mud, this stretch of bank was lined with hundreds of flowers. Pale, low-growing, with broad petals that seemed to glow faintly even in the shade. They grew in perfect silence. No bees, no birds, no motion. Just stillness. Luca whispered, They weren't here before. Camilla didn't answer. She stood in the boat, gently resting a hand over her heart as she watched the shoreline pass. Jonas brought the boat in without being asked. As they stepped onto the soft, flower-covered earth, none of the petals bent beneath their feet. It was like walking on a memory too gentle to disturb. Camilla knelt near a cluster of the blossoms and found something beneath the largest one. A stone. Small, smooth, etched with a spiral. But this time there was something different. It didn't wind inward. It wound out. She looked at Luca. It's not a guide, she said. It's a reflection. He nodded slowly, a spiral becoming something else. They sat in silence among the blooms, letting the quiet stretch around them. There was no wind, no sound, no reason to rush. And then Jonas noticed it. Where they had walked, the petals had changed color, deepening to a soft indigo in the shape of their footprints. Not trampled, not bruised, just marked. The flowers had remembered them. As they pushed back into the river and drifted away, the path they left behind slowly faded, not erased but absorbed into the bloom. The jungle hadn't just welcomed them. It had acknowledged them. They drifted farther into the light. It had changed again, more golden now, soft and slanted, like late afternoon, even though the sun was hidden behind the canopy. The river moved slower still, its surface glassy and dark. There was no sound but the occasional dip of a paddle, and even that was muffled. Then above them, nestled between the limbs of a wide-armed fig tree, they saw the lights. Lanterns, not electric, not firelit, just glowing. Hundreds of them. They hung in silence, cradled among the branches like fruit made of memory. Each one pulsed faintly, some bright, some dim, their lights swaying with no breeze to push them. Luca stood in the boat. They looked like stars that never left. Jonas guided them beneath the tree, careful not to touch the hanging lights. Camilla reached toward one but stopped short of contact. The lantern pulsed once gently. I think they're dreams, she whispered. Ones the jungle kept safe. Each light flickered at a different rhythm, some fast like laughter, some slow like grief, some barely flickering at all, resting perhaps, waiting for someone to come back for them. They passed slowly under the nest. And as they did, one lantern dipped lower than the rest, hovering just above Luca's head. He didn't move. It didn't touch him. It just glowed. And in that glow, for just a second, he saw something. A quiet dock. A fishing pole. A younger version of himself sitting beside his grandfather. Then it was gone. The lantern rose again. He didn't tell the others. He just closed his eyes and let the memory pass through him like a soft wind. Camilla watched him quietly. We're not just finding spirals, she said. We're becoming them. And the lanterns above them swayed not in agreement, but in recognition. The lanterns disappeared behind them as the boat curved through another bend, this one tighter, shallower. The current slowed to a near stop, and the water grew darker, reflecting only pieces of the sky now. Camila kept her eyes low. Luca sat with his arms folded over the edge of the boat, resting his chin on them, blinking slowly. Jonas adjusted nothing. The boat moved as if remembering where to go. Then, without warning, the trees opened onto a clearing. The river widened, briefly, just enough to reveal a small embankment on the left side, where something strange marked the ground. A perfect circle of ash. Not burned. Not scattered. Not smoky. Just still. And cool. As if whatever fire had created, it had done so long ago and had been waiting. They stepped ashore and approached quietly. In the center of the circle stood a wooden post. At its top, a spiral carved into a dark, smooth stone. Unlike the others, this spiral had no open or closed end. It looped in on itself, then branched into smaller spirals, like roots splitting beneath the ground. Camila knelt beside it. This is a place for endings. Jonas crouched down. And beginnings. Luca said nothing. He stepped slowly to the center, placed a hand on the post, and stood there with his eyes closed. After a long while, he whispered, "I think someone came here to forget something." Camila nodded, or to forgive something. They stood inside the circle, not speaking, not moving, and the jungle said nothing in return. Because some places don't need answers. They only need presence. Before they left, Camila reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of paper, a small, forgotten sketch from days earlier. She placed it at the base of the post. The ash did not shift. The spiral did not glow. But the air felt lighter when they stepped away. And when they drifted back onto the river, none of them looked back. Because the circle was not meant to be visited twice. Only remembered. The boat moved on without sound. Even the paddles were still now. The current had returned, slow and sure, like a breath that had waited a long time to be released. Jonas noticed it first. "We've been here before," he said quietly. Camila looked up. The riverbank ahead, lined with tall, folded ferns, was unmistakable. She nodded. "But it's different." Luca leaned over the side, watching the water. "It's the same place, just further in." And that was exactly how it felt. Not like a loop. Not like a mistake. But like walking a circle so wide you didn't realize you were completing it. As they passed the familiar bend, Camila spotted something on the left shore. A small stone half buried in the silt. She motioned for them to slow. They drifted to the bank, and she stepped out, crouching low to uncover it fully. There, etched into the surface, was a new spiral, but it had writing inside the loops this time, tiny marks like brushstrokes, so faint they were nearly invisible. She didn't need to read them. She felt them. Memories, fragments, names maybe, moments. Luca stepped beside her. He pointed to the outermost ring. That wasn't there the first time. Camila smiled softly. "No, we added it." Jonas stayed in the boat, watching the trees shift above him like slow-turning thoughts. "Maybe the jungle isn't showing us new things," he said aloud. "Maybe it's showing us what we've always carried." The others didn't reply. They didn't need to. Because for the first time since their journey began, they weren't seeking anything. They were simply here, present. And as they stepped back into the boat and pushed away from the bank, the spiral behind them did not fade or vanish. It stayed, because some memories belong to places as much as to people. Evening crept in without drama. No birds called out, no frogs stirred. The forest simply changed its light, turning amber, then rose, then that quiet kind of gray that settles across a dream before it fades. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Jonas guided the boat with his eyes half closed. Luca dozed in a soft slouch, his head tilted toward the sound of water lapping against the side. Camila sat upright, eyes on the trees, her hands resting in her lap, open. And that's when it came. A wind. Not strong. Not cold. Just present. It drifted through the trees with no rustling. It passed across the surface of the water without breaking it. It moved through them, not around, and they each felt it in a different way. Luca opened his eyes. Camila shivered but didn't move. Jonas leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Did you feel that?" Camila nodded. "It didn't come from the sky." "No," Luca said softly. "It came from below." The boat passed through a narrow corridor of trees where the trunks stood close together like silent guards, vines wrapped among them swaying not from breeze but from breath. Camila whispered, "We're being measured." Jonas raised an eyebrow. "For what?" She didn't answer, because she didn't know. The trees parted again, opening into a long, still channel lined with mossy stones. On each stone a spiral, some perfect, some broken, some twisted into new shapes altogether, spirals within spirals like thoughts reflecting themselves. The wind returned once more, but this time it didn't pass through them. It settled, softly, like a cloak draped over their shoulders. And in that moment the journey changed, not in direction but in depth. Because now they weren't just traveling through the jungle, they were being invited into it. The light had changed again. This time it glowed from below. Luca was the first to notice how the riverbed shimmered faintly beneath the surface. Not gold, not silver, but a kind of soft green light, like moss in sunlight or fireflies gathering in a single breath. Camila leaned over the edge of the boat. "There's something down there." Jonas slowed them gently. The water had grown clearer. Though still tinted with the deep greens of the canopy, it now revealed the slow-moving patterns just beneath petals. Hundreds of them, not floating, growing. From the riverbed, like a submerged meadow, wide blossoms with glassy textures and pale light pulsing gently from their centers. They didn't move with the current. They moved with intention. Luca whispered, "Are they watching us?" Camila didn't answer. She simply reached down and touched the surface of the water. The blossoms didn't scatter. They opened wider. One by one, in perfect rhythm, they revealed themselves, each one centered around a tiny carved spiral. Not etched into wood or stone, but grown into the petal itself. Living spirals. The jungle wasn't showing them something hidden. It was showing them something it had made. Jonas leaned close. "It's not just memory anymore." Camila nodded. "It's communication." They drifted in silence through the glowing field, no need to paddle, no desire to stop. Above them, the trees remained still. Below them, the river bloomed. And within them, something old and quiet began to rise, not a voice, not a purpose, but a kind of knowing. And for the first time, they realized they weren't meant to understand everything. They were only meant to witness it, to remember it, to carry it gently the way the blossoms carried their light. The river narrowed once more, not from trees but from stone. Smooth rock walls rose on either side, gently curved, almost sculpted. Not cliffs, not barriers, just soft shapes pressing in, creating a natural corridor barely wider than the boat. The water here was clear, still lit by the faint green glow of the blossoms they had passed, though none grew beneath them now. The bottom of the river was polished, flat stone covered in lines. Not cracks, not carvings. Paths. Spirals again, but now flowing together. No longer individual. They intertwined and overlapped, like roots searching through the same soil, forming one wide pattern that could only be seen from above. Luca said softly, "It's like a map?" "No," Camila whispered. "It's like a memory too big to belong to one person." Jonas touched the side of the boat as they floated deeper into the narrow canyon. The walls shimmered faintly with moss and minerals, iridescent, almost humming. Above, no sky. Only branches curled overhead like woven arms. The deeper they went, the more the sound changed. Every drip of water, every movement of their hands echoed gently against the stone. Not loudly, not sharply, just enough to make each sound feel folded, cushioned. Like the forest had begun to hold their words. Camila rested her hand on the surface of the water. Her reflection was clear, but it didn't quite move with her. It lingered behind, then faded. The spiral beneath them glowed just once, then dimmed again. Jonas whispered, "We're passing through something." Luca nodded, "A threshold." The air smelled faintly of flowers now, ones they hadn't seen, ones they hadn't remembered yet. And as the boat slid silently along the path of soft stone, all three of them knew they were no longer just travelers. They were part of the story now. The stone corridor widened again. Not suddenly, softly, as though the jungle had been holding its breath and was now exhaling gently around them. Above, the trees stretched wider, their limbs arching until they met again in the sky, not to block the light, but to reflect it. Leaves shimmered with a thin sheen of silver green, and in their curves, the travelers saw themselves. Not in reflection, in memory. Luca looked up and saw his childhood bedroom window, open at night, moonlight casting a pool across his blankets. A breeze blowing pages of an old notebook. The sound of someone humming in the next room. Camilla saw the beach near her grandmother's house, where driftwood spiraled in the sand without anyone ever placing it there, where she learned to listen before speaking. Jonas saw a fire. Not dangerous, not destructive. Just a flame in a quiet room. And the sound of a name, his own, spoken softly by someone he once trusted long ago. None of them said what they saw. They didn't need to. Because in that wide part of the river, under the mirror canopy, the jungle was no longer showing them itself. It was showing them who they were before they forgot. And then a soft sound, not a bird, not water, something simpler. A bell. Faint, distant, not mechanical. Organic, like wind brushing the edge of a hollow fruit. It rang once, and all three of them looked at each other. Not with fear, with recognition. They were close to what they didn't know. But whatever it was, they had already met it long before they arrived. The river stopped, not in a sudden way. In the way a song ends, quietly, with one final note held just a breath longer than the rest. The boat drifted forward, then slowed and came to rest against a soft bank made not of sand or mud, but of something glowing. Not bright, not strange, just soft. A field of luminous grass, thin and blue-white, swaying ever so slightly in air that barely moved. Above, the trees gave way to sky, not the same sky they had seen before. This one felt older, lighter, more aware. The three travelers stepped out of the boat without needing to ask one another. They walked into the grass, which bent without resistance, parting around their ankles like water, then rising back into place once they passed. In the center of the field was a circle of small stones. Camilla approached it first, then slowly knelt. Each stone bore a different spiral, but this time the spirals were not etched or carved. They were grown. Patterns formed in the veins of the stone, like vines or river currents or fingerprints. Each one alive in a quiet way. Luca sat beside her. Jonas remained standing for a while, watching the horizon. And then they listened. Not with their ears, but with whatever part of a person listens when silence becomes more than just the absence of noise. They listened to the earth, to the sky, to the spiral-shaped air around them. No visions came. No voice spoke. No mystery revealed itself, because there was nothing left to find. Only something to be accepted. That they were here. That the journey mattered. That the jungle was never a place. It was a memory, shared by the world, and kept alive by travelers willing to slow down long enough to listen. They remained in the field for a long while. There was no reason to leave. No pull to move forward. No urge to discover more. The spiral stones around them sat in gentle silence, their patterns glowing faintly, like stars seen through a light mist. The glowing grass swayed in a rhythm none of them could trace, as if moved by a tide beneath the earth. Camilla lay on her back, staring up at the sky. It didn't feel high above her anymore. Felt close, like the canopy of a tent she had always been beneath, but had only just now looked up to notice. She whispered, "This isn't the end." Jonas smiled, lying beside her. "No, it's the part where endings don't matter." Luca sat a few paces away, legs folded beneath him, eyes closed. His breathing matched the quiet movement of the field, slow and even, like he was synced with something older than time. The field began to hum. Not loud, not sharp. A resonance felt more than heard. The stones warmed slightly, a gentle heat rising through the mossy earth beneath them. And in that warmth, something passed between them. Not words, not memories. Just knowing that they had been here before. In different forms. In different lives. In dreams they didn't remember having. Jonas whispered, "What happens now?" Camila turned to him, her voice no louder than the wind. "Nothing." And that word didn't mean emptiness. It meant peace. They didn't need a final message. They didn't need a revelation. They didn't need to understand the spirals. Because the journey had never been about finding something hidden. It had been about softening enough to receive what was always being offered. The jungle. The river. The silence. The self. All things that ask nothing in return, only that you stay long enough to let go. Above them, a single leaf drifted from the sky, spinning slowly as it fell. It landed beside Luca's hand, not as a sign, not as a symbol, but as a kindness. Because even the jungle knows every goodbye should feel gentle. They awoke slowly, not from sleep, but from stillness. The field remained, glowing, breathing, humming, but the spirals on the stones had dimmed now, not gone, just resting. Camila stood first. The air was soft against her skin, like fabric that had been warmed by the sun and folded into shadow. She walked to the edge of the field, where the glowing grass faded into soil again. There, waiting as if it had never left, was the boat. Still, empty, dry. Jonas and Luca joined her wordlessly. None of them asked if they should leave. None of them spoke about the spirals. There was no need, because the forest no longer held questions, only presence. They stepped into the boat, sat in the same places they had when the journey began. Camila at the front, Luca at the center, Jonas guiding from the back. And the moment they settled in, the current returned. Not with force, with familiarity, like an old friend waking up beside them. The boat drifted forward, out of the glowing field and back into the slow dark of the trees. But now, the forest looked different. Not because it had changed, but because they had. The vines were no longer dense. The shadows were no longer uncertain. The river was no longer something to follow. It was part of them. They passed the memory tree again. It shimmered gently, but showed nothing, because they no longer needed to see what had come before. They passed the place with the broken spirals. The hollow was filled in now by moss or time or peace. And then they passed the place where the flowers bloomed beneath the water. Only now they bloomed on the surface too. Petals drifting silently, forming small spirals that broke and reformed as the boat moved through them. Jonas dipped a hand into the water. Camila closed her eyes. Luca whispered something they didn't quite hear but felt. And then the river widened one last time. Beyond it, a soft mist hung low over the surface. The trees thinned, the sky opened, and though no path appeared, they knew where they were going, because it no longer mattered where, only how. With softness, with stillness, with memory of spirals folding gently into the current. And as the boat drifted forward, slowly, endlessly, peacefully, the jungle behind them closed its eyes. Not to forget, but to rest. You've just experienced another chapter from Sleep Story's Restless Minds. If you're still awake, we hope you're feeling slower, softer, and a little more connected to the story and to yourself. The jungle you traveled through doesn't end when the story does. It lingers just behind your eyelids, in the quiet between breaths, in the hush of leaves you'll hear as you fall asleep tonight. If this brought you peace, consider subscribing and letting your thoughts rest with us again soon. New stories arrive regularly, each one written with gentle hands just for minds like yours. Good night, and may your dreams spiral